Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are wrapping up our position by position rankings of the NBA. We are going to be giving out our top 10 centers in the league. This is a strong position, Logan. It's been interesting going position by position because you see there's some real strong groups and then there's a couple that are weaker, and it's basically your point guards, your primary ball handlers loaded, your big wings, big forwards, your power forwards loaded, and your straight up bigs, your centers. Those are kind of the three archetypes that are dominating the league right now, and so those are the three strongest groups. That's my big picture takeaway. But when it comes to this list, Logan, before we get into the 10 who made it, who was your toughest cut?
I think people would be really surprised by who my toughest cut was.
Here we go.
For longtime listeners of Nerd Sesh, they won't be. I've been a longtime detractor of Domantas Sabonis, and he is my first guy off my list. Now, before I get into the negatives of Sabonis, I do want to give him some credit. Sabonis is a phenomenal rebounder, one of the best in the league straight up. I think he's a great screener. I think he's a really good decision maker. I think he's a solid passer. He's really unique in the sense that you can run plays through him offensively. If he is dotting up a guy, if you're running handoffs through him. And legitimately, I think we've seen growth from Sabonis defensively. Like, he is not as bad as he once was. That being said, I still think Sabonis is a little bit plodding defensively. He's not a floor spacer. And I think he's limited more offensively than his numbers would suggest. He is still a brute force scoring big man. You know, Carson, some people with his raw numbers would have even suggested that he should have won MVP. Shout out to you, Kendrick Perkins.
Sabonis, great take.
Sabonis' stat line is really good. 19 points, 14 boards, 8 assists on 64% true shooting. But I just don't think his archetype is the most conducive to winning basketball. When I look at his archetype in comparison to the more traditional rim-running, play-finishing, rim-protecting big men, I just prefer those guys a little more. And like I said, I think he has real offensive flaws that the box score wouldn't indicate. He's just an above-average role man. He is not a reliable guy in one-on-one situations. He's just a 23rd percentile post-up scorer. And while he has improved shooting, you're comfortable leaving Sabonis alone on mid-range attempts, on three-point attempts. He's not a real floor spacer. And so I'm just going to value guys' skill sets that lean more towards being more defensively oriented, or you bring legitimate floor spacing. And for some of those guys, those skill sets converge. And I think Sabonis is a good big man. But like when I think about really high ceiling-raising, high-impact winning players, I just think Sabonis puts a really hard cap on how great your defense can be. I think Sabonis is a really good big man, but I just think there's guys in archetypes that are a little more valuable, and I prefer those guys. So Sabonis is a really good big man, but he's number 11 for me.
This is surprising, I would say, but like you said, it's not that surprising. When you're out on a guy, Logan, you are out on him. And I can respect that. I do think sometimes you take it a little bit far. I'm interested who is in your 10 spot, because I think the gap between 7 and 10 on this list is really, really slim. I am definitely not the biggest Sabonis guy because of some of his limitations, but I do think that he is clear of everybody who I left off my list. However, the one dude who I'm most interested in, where you have him, who was probably my toughest cut, was Alperen Şengün, who has a lot of similarities to Domas, just in terms of some of the flaws of the archetype, right, being these below average defensive bigs. I do think that although Şengün is the more skilled post scorer of the two, Sabonis is the more valuable offensive player because he is significantly more efficient. Both of these dudes are unproven as jump shooters, but Sabonis is more efficient, more capable there at this stage in his career. And then I do think there is a different level of maturity with him in terms of his consistency as a playmaker, being just a complete fulcrum of an offense. Şengün is a incredibly flashy passer. He's a very gifted passer, but I do think you get more consistent playmaking value with Domas. He is the more overwhelmingly elite rebounder. So that's why when we're comparing the two in that archetype, I favor Sabonis. The efficiency for Şengün does need to improve a good bit for me to really buy in on him as a dude who it's like he can be a star, a key piece on a really good basketball team.
I'm intrigued. I don't have Sengun on my list either, so there's somebody that I guess is
Oh.
lower than these guys that's going to crack my list.
Mmm.
I'm
Color me
I,
intrigued.
I'm very, very intrigued with this. I like Sengun a lot too. Very similar archetypes, but I completely agree with you. I think there's a rebounding gap. I think there's a, like you said, a strength and physicality and maturity gap that I just prefer with Sabonis, and he's just a little bit more polished at this point. I'm not out on Sengun though. I think that uh, there's more that he can tap into.
A very
There's
talented basketball player.
very, and I think there's even more room for growth with Sengun.
Okay, so who is in that 10 spot for you, Logan?
In my 10 spot, I'm going to assume you left him off the list. I have Jarrett Allen here.
That's the guy who I thought you would have,
Interesting.
if
Okay.
it weren't Şengün.
Yeah. And it goes back to the archetypal thing that I just mentioned with Sabonis, why I have Allen over him. Give me the higher impact rim protector and the play finisher instead of the skilled big. I just prefer his skill set a little more. This past season, Allen put up 17 points, 11 boards, and 3 assists on 66% true shooting. With 1.1 blocks per game, he held players 7.5% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That was the 13th best mark in the NBA, minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. And Jarrett Allen has a very simple game, man. He's going to finish stuff around the rim at a really high level. He's not going to take a ton of bad shots. He's going to rebound pretty well, and he's going to protect the hell out of the rim. There's not a ton of skill here with Jarrett Allen's game. It's a fundamental limiter of his game. I think he's gotten a little better as a playmaker and a passer, decision maker over the past couple years. It's not a massive, massive improvement, but it's marginal. He's not super skilled. He's got a very simple game. He's going to protect the rim at a high level. He's going to finish lobs. He's going to finish attempts around the rim at a really high level, and he's not going to make too many mistakes. I just prefer defensive-minded bigs compared to those really skilled guys. I think it's just more valuable having a guy that can anchor your defense, that can legitimately take you up a level and protect the rim. Again, I think Sabonis has gotten better there. I would still consider him a little bit of a liability on the interior, considering his vertical limitations. Allen just doesn't have those vertical limitations, and that's why I prefer his skill set. So Allen's interesting in the sense that I think that you can probably find serviceable bigs that do his job at a 70 to 80% level. I think it's probably harder to find a guy with Sabonis' skill set, but like I say, I prefer that rim protector and rim runner role just a little bit more than a guy like Sabonis' archetype.
So this kind of harkens back to a debate that we have had several times over throughout these position groups, which is valuing a guy who can fill a role at a high level, but is probably going to be your fourth best player if you want to be a really good team, versus a guy who is going to have the ability to produce with the volume of a star, but has some clear flaws when it comes to that guy being like one of the top two guys on a really good team. And then how can he adjust to a lower usage role? How can he do the winning things on the margin? Not as well as the dude who is already embracing a role, who has that simple, clear-cut two-way impact. And what's funny is I feel like generally I lean on the side of the winning role player more than the average person. But then I feel like sometimes you take it really far where I'm like, Domantas Sabonis versus Jarrett Allen, like there's just a complete different level of ability as a basketball player. There are dudes, absolutely, who are just really high-level defenders and rim finishers, vertical spacing bigs, who I would really consider up against Domantas Sabonis. I just don't think Allen is an exceptional enough version of it, and I do want to give him some props for areas in which he's improved. He has improved his feel as a playmaker. He has improved his touch as a non-dunk finisher. He is a very good rim protector. And he is a guy who's capable of guarding in space. You see in that Orlando series, when he's out there, he can hang with a Paolo Banchero, a big wing like that, who isn't just the quickest downhill. He can hang with a Franz Wagner. I wouldn't say that he is the most switchable big, but with those big wings, big forwards, he can hold his own. But yeah, I just think that there is a different level of transformative impact that Sabonis can have, and there's just too many dudes who I can find who will give me, as you say, 70, 80% of what Jarrett Allen does. He was my number 12, so he was on my short list. He's just not a standout enough in this mold to be in my top 10. However, the guy who I do have in my 10 spot is sort of the epitome of this role, and I really considered him higher. In fact, I considered him all the way up to number 7. I have Rudy Gobert here, though, and I go back and forth on Rudy, man. I really do, because in a lot of ways, you can bank on him having an elite impact on the game in a way that you can't with Domantas Sabonis. And whether you think he's the Timberwolves' second best player, whether you think he's their third best player, there's just no question they are not the basketball team that they are without Rudy Gobert. He is arguably the best defender on the planet. I would say the best pure interior defender on the planet still. Holds opposing players 13% below their average inside of 6 feet when he is the defender. And the thing that we always hear maligned about Rudy's defense is his ability to guard in space, right? You've always heard people claim that he gets played off the floor in these playoff environments because he can't hang against 5-out teams. He can't switch. These things that just aren't true. He's a 79th percentile isolation defender, a 77th percentile post-up defender. When it comes to one-on-one defense, that's something that we also hear maligned because Nikola Jokic cooks him. Nobody else does, though. And Nikola Jokic cooks everybody. And in fact, if you look at this playoff run, all of these stars who Gobert guarded, except for Luka and Jokic, and in that group, I am counting KD, Kyrie, Book, Jamal Murray, and Bradley Beal. Maybe being a little generous with star there, but whatever. High-end offensive player. All of those guys, when guarded by Gobert, shot 32 of 85 combined. That's 37%. So he defended these highly skilled perimeter players very well on an island. You saw that throughout the Sun series, right? He was playing every coverage at a high level. He was switching. He was blitzing at times. The fact that he can't stop a Jokic post-up or a Luka step back three, like, that is not some condemnation of his defensive game. Those are unguardable shots, and he is not an exception to that. He's not the best big guarding in space. He's not Bam. He's not quite an AD, but he is good there, and he is dominant as an interior defender, and he can change complete basketball series. Now, I do want to give props to the totality of the Timberwolves defense, because you saw some incredible perimeter defense, some just lethal ball pressure that completely slowed down opposing offenses. You saw the great post defense of Karl-Anthony Towns on Nikola Jokic, the aggressive doubling of all the dudes around Rudy Gobert, and you saw a dominant defensive performance in Game 2 against the Nuggets without Gobert on the floor. So I do want to make sure we give proper credit to the athleticism, the length, the all-around dog of that Minnesota defense, but Gobert is the best and most important part of it. And there are other areas in which he brings clear positive value. He's a monstrous rebounder. He is an elite screener, and he has improved offensively. He was an 86th percentile post scorer this year in terms of efficiency, and he's ramped up his volume there over the last couple years. It's never going to be pretty, but the ability to draw a cross match and just to get that entry pass and maybe draw a foul, maybe finish over a way smaller player, like, he's gotten more comfortable at that over the years, and that does make a difference in his offensive game. The reason I have him this low, and again, I am conflicted about it, because you can bank on that elite defensive impact, and that is going to change games. It's just that there are extended stretches where he is brutal offensively, where he is a glaring liability, where you might as well be playing 4-on-5, where Ant will not give him the ball on the roll because he's fumbling catches, because he's mismanaging his footwork, because he's not making the proper reads as a short roller, because he can't finish with any sort of skill when he catches the ball outside of the restricted area. And that wasn't the case every single time that he touched it in this playoff run. I thought his short roll passing was okay, but it was pretty brutal. And the ability to basically neglect Gobert as a roller is just really damaging and really limiting to this Minnesota offense. So when you have the potential to be that damaging to an offense, it's tougher for me to have you higher than this, no matter how great you are defensively. And he is one of the great players that we've seen on that end.
No, I completely understand the argument here. I have Gobert 2 spots higher at number 8, and he really is polarizing, you know? He's kind of been the league's punching bag for some time now. Like, a lot of people goof on him, and I don't blame him. Like, he's gangly, he's goofy, he's uncoordinated, I don't know if they don't like him because he's French, man. I don't know what people's beef is.
Probably doesn't
Gobert,
help,
man. He is one of the greatest defenders in NBA history, though, and that is why I have him 2 spots higher. you mentioned the mark about holding players 13% below their average inside 6 feet. That was the second best mark in all of the NBA. And he is finally, as you alluded to, amplified by his supporting cast. I mean, for years, he was just putting the Jazz's defense on his back. I do understand why you would have him this low. By far, I mean, it's not even close. Rudy Gobert is the most offensively limited player on this list.
Yeah.
He is a liability at times, and so I understand the argument, but it is that consistent baseline. He's been one of the league's best rim protectors for some years now. He is massive. He is monstrous. He is strong. He is an elite rebounder, and I still really value that. But in comparison to everybody above him on this list, and even one guy that I have him below, the one guy that I have below him in the 9 spot, it's not even close. I mean, Gobert is an extreme liability, but I really do value highly that defense that he brings you. And, I mean, you see it. I mean, you can still win a ton of games. You can still advance really far in the playoffs with those limitations. And, you know, I mean, you take Minnesota out of that. You take Gobert out of Minnesota, and, I mean, the defense drops off significantly. So I understand people clowning on Gobert. I understand the frustrations. I was having this conversation with one of my roommates. I don't understand how these guys are in the league for so long, Carson. They just do not develop any kind of offensive skill.
Yeah.
It's puzzling, but I'll take the bad with the good, man. I mean, he is still one of the league's best interior rim protectors, one of the best rebounders. And like I said with Jarrett Allen, I really value that. Those are the two most valuable things to me at the center spot. Defense, rim protection, rebounding. Those are 3 things. I said 2, but rim protection and rebounding are 2 of the most important things in basketball, and Rudy Gobert does those things at a very, very high level.
He absolutely does. And it's tough for me to have him this low. It is.
Sorry.
The margins are crazy small.
Final point I wanted to add on to that, the thing you were saying about Luka and Jokic, I just want to expand upon that a little more. I mean, come on, guys. Like, Jokic and Luka are the 2 best offensive players in basketball. I don't hold that against Rudy at all. Now, it is interesting to me, Carson, at the end of Rudy Gobert's career, I think it's going to be really funny. We will probably have a 10 to 20-minute compilation of this guy getting absolutely cooked.
Yeah.
It's rare in comparison to the other great defenders in NBA history. It's unique. Like, I don't think there's going to be anybody with that kind of a low-light defensive reel. But in those matchups specifically, I mean, everybody gets abused by those guys one-on-one. I don't hold that against Gobert at all.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a tendency to stumble like a baby deer on ice skates when it happens, and that's not good for the reputation. But as I said, look at what he did in that Suns series guarding in space. Look at what he did against everybody other than Luka and Jokic one-on-one. He did very, very well on top of this dominant rim protection and interior defense. So he's in my 10 spot. Who is in your 9 spot, Logan?
In my 9 spot is another guy that I considered. You talk about maybe having Gobert up to 7. I thought maybe this guy could climb that high, and that's Myles Turner. I really value Myles Turner's skill set. Do you not have him on your list at all?
I do not have him on my list at all.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I rock with Myles Turner, man. He's taken a step back in terms of rebounding and rim protection over the past couple of years. He's not as dominant as he once was, but again, I really value rim protection and floor spacing, and he does those things at a really high level. In these playoffs, 17.7 boards, 2 assists on 64% true shooting. He shot 45% from deep and 45% off the catch. It's a really unique skill set. He's a really good rim finisher and, a guy who you can throw oops to, especially with a guy like Halliburton. He's got a really unique skill set, and those 3 things that he does at a high level, rim protection, shooting, rim finishing, it's really, really valuable. And in comparison to a guy like Allen, to a guy like Sabonis, I think he's a better rim protector than Sabonis. I think he's probably a little bit worse of a rebounder and rim protector than Jarrett Allen. He averages more blocks per game, but I think Allen's a little bit more disruptive. But there's a massive gap in terms of, shooting and skill set. And I think you saw it in these playoffs, man. That ability to pop at such a high level and to knock down all those shots, it's really unique. And it's really, really valuable in today's NBA. I think Turner's got a really, really unique skill set that I value at a high level, man. He does some of the most valuable things at the center spot at a really high level. I wish he rebounded a little bit more. but I'm not going to hold that against him, man. He can shoot the hell out of the ball. He can protect the rim at a really high level, and I really value those things, man. It's a unique skill set at this size.
He just doesn't protect the rim at that high a level anymore. Like, I mean, he can rack up his block numbers, and even those aren't what they used to be, but Myles Turner is not a good defensive big. If you look at opponent field goal percentage at the rim, he's only holding guys like 4-5% below their average. For a center, that is a thoroughly average number because, right, no matter what you're challenging, the biggest player, like that number for the elite guys is 10+%, and he can't guard in space for shit. And he doesn't give the same effort on the defensive end of the floor that he used to. So I'm not going to lie to you, Logan. This is batshit crazy. Like, I really like Myles Turner. He just had an amazing jump shooting season. He is one of, if not the best, pure pick and pop bigs in basketball. But, like, that's the only thing he does at a really high level. He's ultimately not like a high-end vertical spacer. He's not a high-end defensive big. He brings you nothing in terms of playmaking. This is privilege. This is situation bias. I'm sorry. Having him above Domantas Sabonis, like, these are both offensively oriented bigs. One of them is on a completely different level in terms of their ability to create for others, to impact team offense, to still score more efficiently. Now, do I think that Myles Turner is a better pure scorer than Sabonis in a vacuum? Maybe slightly, but the playmaking gap is much larger, and it's much larger than what you're seeing between the two of them on the defensive end. Myles Turner gets to play with a pick and roll genius who is constantly hitting him in his spots and creating advantages. Sabonis is fundamental to great team offense. So we must not have one of the same dudes on our lists. I'm just going to ask it outright. Are you considering Karl-Anthony Towns a center?
Bro, I completely forgot about Karl-Anthony Towns, bro. I completely forgot that guy existed for real.
Yeah, because things were not adding up.
No, I guess I should have put him on my power forwards list, actually. So you know what, man? Sassy Cat's unfortunately going to be omitted from all of my top 10
You're not putting
rankings.
him on your center list. You're not bumping off Jarrett Allen for Karl-Anthony Towns.
I would consider him more of a 4. I should have had him on my 4s list. I just forgot about him.
I mean, that is fair because I have been trying to avoid having multiple dudes on the same team at the same position. But my God, Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert are both centers. Like, they just are. For 29 of the 30 teams, right, they would be the center. It just happens to be here that Cat is sort of a 4 or 5 hybrid. But I'm still considering him a center, and he is on my list. Very surprising, Logan. Very surprising. The power forwards list, you shocked me. The centers list, you shocked me. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't like Myles Turner at 9. I don't like it.
I'd probably bump Triple J off my power forwards list and insert Cat. That's what
probably.
I would do.
I mean, come on. Cat's better than Triple J. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah, if I would make an audible, I just think, I mean, he plays the 4 spot. But I get it. Yeah, I would have Cat in my 10 spot for power forwards.
Okay. All right. The revision has been made. I don't know if Cat gets on the graphic. He doesn't get in the episode. Sorry, pal. In my number 9 spot, I have Chet Holmgren, Logan. And I think Chet has the potential to sky so much higher than this. Because when you talk about the traits that you look for in the ideal modern big.
Go ahead. Make the Myles Turner case. Make the Myles Turner case.
3 things that stand out. It's not Myles Turner because Myles Turner only has one of them. And it's the ability to shoot the basketball. It is the ability to protect the rim at a high level. It is the ability to finish around the rim as a roll man. And if you want to get spicy, it's the ability to shoot the shit out of the ball, to be a floor spacing stretch 5. Chet does all of those things at a very high level, and he brings a whole lot of juice on top of that. Like, the ball handling that you get from him is so impressive. The playmaking that you get from him is so unique. He really does have that unicorn sort of skill set. And when he came out of the draft, this was pre-Wemby, but I said this is the best prospect that we have seen since Anthony Davis. And I stand by that. On the defensive end, players in this postseason shot 15% worse than normal versus Chet at the rim. That was the best differential by any volume rim protector, and he led the playoffs in blocks per game, and he made that OKC interior defense elite. In the regular season, that field goal percentage differential at the rim was over 11, which was a top 5 mark. So he's an elite pure rim protector, and he can really guard in space. That's always been his greatest strength as a prospect, just that sort of dominant defensive skill set. Offensively, though, he's also a freak talent. He was an 88th percentile pick and roll creator this year, Logan. Now, he's not doing that at high volume, but the ability to run inverted pick and roll, to shoot over the top of the defense, to make reads, finding screeners, it's freakish at that size. To put the ball on the floor and drive and make a kick out pass, like, he is really exceptional in that respect. He's also a 78th percentile isolation creator. Ridiculous from your 7-footer. He's a 78th percentile roll man. Is a massive lob target, huge catch radius, very fluid mover. Can also shoot the hell out of it as a popper. This is a guy who you can consistently find as a trailer from deep in transition. Like, there is just so much vertical spacing, floor spacing, ball handling, and passing from your center. It's ridiculous. And this is why I have him above Rudy Gobert. These are both elite defensive centers. Gobert is the better defensive center at this stage because he is, first of all, significantly better on the glass. That is a limitation of Chet's, and he is better built for those super physical playoff environments. Chet still can defend in the post because even though he is skinny as can be, he is so long. His timing is so good. I mean, I would argue he has the best pure timing of any shot blocker in basketball right now, and he's got ridiculous length to complement that. He has all that going for him at a really, really high level. Gobert is just more physically mature by a pretty wide margin at this point. But I think the offensive gap does offset that in Chet's favor. The reason I don't have him higher, because when I think about Chet Holmgren, I fully expect him to be a top 10 player in this league. I do. I just think he's going to grow in all of these categories, and he's checking all of the boxes to have a truly elite impact at the 5 or at the 4, which he'll play a lot more of this year with Isaiah Hartenstein. He just wasn't at the level offensively that I wanted him to be at in this postseason run. 15.6 points per game on 58% true shooting, only 26% from deep. And he went cold from beyond the arc. That's not something that I expect from a very, very good shooter, although he did have a little bit of a streakiness to him throughout this year, but he's awesome at that normally. That was one problem. The other problem was just his inability to prevent Dallas from switching everything. The fact that he's just not the level of post player that he would need to be to punish them for doing that. And so that allowed them to do exactly what they wanted defensively. And that was a problem for OKC's offense. It was a reason that they continually stagnated. If he were able to attack those mismatches more effectively, then he would already be higher on this list. So I prefer the offensive skill advantage to Rudy, and I do think that he will only play better on that end going forward, especially in the playoffs compared to this year. But the inconsistency, the immaturity when it comes to him taking on a real high volume role, the ability to impact the game at the level where it's like you put that guy in a playoff game with the best dudes in the world, and it's like, do you think that he can be the best player on the floor? With the dude who I have one spot above Chet, there's inconsistency. We have seen him reach that level, though. The Chet that we saw in the playoffs, I didn't think was quite ready for that level. But I love the guy. I have all the Chet stock in the world. This feels like an appropriate spot for him at this moment, after his rookie year, let's keep in mind.
Yeah, I have Chet in my 7 spot. I have him 1 spot ahead of Rudy. I agree with a lot of what you said about the gap between them. It's going to be hard. You know, Chet's not going to close that rebounding or strength or any of the advantages that Rudy has, but again, the offensive skill gap is so massive. And you talk about the playoffs, I don't really care or worry about the playoff shortcomings at all. I think Chet is as sure of a thing offensively as it comes. He is one of the most skilled guys at this size I have ever seen. The handle,
Absolutely.
the feel, the pace, the shooting touch. You said it, he's a unicorn, man. These freaks that have been coming out, Kristaps, Chet, Wemby, these freakishly long, tall guys who can protect the hell out of the rim and shoot the hell out of the ball. It's an invaluable skill set in today's NBA, and I only think he's going to get better. So that's why I've got him above Rudy. I think he can only improve from here, and I really expect that in this next season, man. He's already one of the best rim protectors in the league. You mentioned the playoff stat. He was the 5th best rim protector inside 6 feet this past season. Again, I just think he's really great at a lot of things right now, and he's only going to continue to improve. So I've got him at number 7.
Yeah, will only continue to improve. No question. I'm with you in terms of his long-term offensive level. It's just the consistency at this point is not at the level of the dudes above him. And of course, he's bringing more defensive value, but there was a pretty big gap in terms of the offensive level, I would say, in this postseason run. So in my number 8 spot, I do have Karl-Anthony Towns. Kat, I did not forget about you. And it's very close between him and Rudy. Like, it really is in terms of their impact. And I think if you were to move off of one of them as Minnesota, it probably would be Cat, because you think our foundation is so predicated upon the elite defense that Rudy is so essential to. And can we find somebody who is a big wing, who can play the power forward spot, who's maybe a more intuitive fit, right? Where we don't necessarily have 2 straight up bigs, who can bring most of the value that Cat. There's not a lot of guys out there, but maybe that's an easier spot to replace than the all-world defensive value of Gobert. I just think with Cat's defensive improvement, and that's not to say that he is some stud defensively, but that paired with the offensive skill set does make me prefer him just by a tiny, tiny margin. He gave you 22, 8, and 3 on 63% true shooting in the regular season, and he really is a special weapon offensively, one of the most skilled offensive bigs that we have ever seen. Really the best 3-point shooting center that we have seen. Volume, efficiency, the ability to do it off movement, off the dribble. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's a 78th percentile player off screens. Like, again, that shooting off movement at 7 feet, you just don't see. 89th percentile roll man, very efficient there. And a 75th percentile post-up player, capable of just brutalizing mismatches, which is extra problematic for defenses when you have both him and Gobert out there. And so you're trying to guard Towns with like a bigger wing. There's not a lot of wings who can guard Cat on an island. He is also a legit passer, one of the better playmaking 5s. Now, he has moments where he's losing control. He's not taking care of the ball. He's not making his reads. But overall, he is a plus passer at the position. And defensively, his effort has improved significantly. And his ability to guard out of the post is really stellar. Now, when it comes to guarding in space, he has issues. When it comes to protecting the rim, he's mediocre. But his most important task defensively in his life was guarding Nikola Jokic to allow Gobert to roam in that matchup against the Nuggets. And he did a really, really phenomenal job of flattening out those Jokic post-ups, playing physically with him, providing just this massive, strong body who he had to go through. And he, in terms of just pure post defense, fared a good bit better than Gobert, who we're talking about as maybe the best defender alive in that matchup. And you can say, all right, well, post defense isn't the most important thing in the modern NBA, and I would agree with you. But when you can do that against the best post player, the best offensive player on the planet, I've never seen anybody else defend him that well. That matters. That does move the needle on that side of the ball, especially because you have to go through that team probably if you want to advance to the conference finals and beyond, as Minnesota did this past year. I gave his regular season numbers. The playoff numbers, not quite as good. 19, 9, and 3 on 58% true shooting. And there was a lot of good from Cat in this playoff run. The Suns series, when he was on the floor, they just could not guard him. KD was too slight. He was bullying him. He was shooting the ball exceptionally well through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, playing very efficient basketball. And then you have the Dallas series. And the Dallas series was just brutal. He went ice cold as a jump shooter, 24% from deep, tanked his efficiency, and too often you got the out of control bad Cat facing up these drives where there's too many dribbles of the basketball. He's getting out of control, which is the worst thing that can happen, and he has to bear a lot of responsibility for that loss. In that inconsistency, unfortunately, and that immaturity, I mentioned staying on the floor in the Sun series. That's when he wasn't picking up multiple fouls in the early goings of the game. That is ultimately why Cat can't be higher on this, because he unequivocally has the talent to climb higher on this list. You think about the highs, and this was what I was referring to in comparison to Chet. There is a level of the peak offensive impact and the physicality in these playoff environments that Cat is already built for that Chet can't reach at this stage coming off of his rookie season. In Game 7 against the Nuggets, a rock fight of a game in which Minnesota shot under 40%, Cat was extremely efficient offensively. He was easily the best source of offense for them, and he was probably the best defensive player on the floor in that game. Did an awesome job on Nikola Jokic. So, like, highest stakes, roughest, ugliest environment, he was the best player on the floor with Nikola Jokic opposite him. Arguably the best player on the floor. He was certainly the best Timberwolf, and they're the guys who won. But then you think about the Dallas series, and it was really, really ugly. So, unfortunately, I don't trust Cat enough yet when it comes to playing smart to put him higher than this. And this was very much a roller coaster playoff run for him, which unfortunately every playoff run up to this point has been. The first couple featured more bad than good. This one was more balanced, but it did ultimately still leave a sour taste in your mouth. I just think he's too skilled offensively, and he's approved by enough defensively for me to have him above guys with more offensive questions. That's not to say that Chet isn't a very good offensive player, but there is definitely a gap between Cat at this point and Chet at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you on a lot of what you said. I mean, especially just about the consistency. I mean, if Cat can play controlled basketball, you said it exactly right. The talent is not an issue, and that's what makes Cat such a frustrating player to watch. You'll get the stretch, lights out, playing smart ball. Mm-hmm. And then you get bad Cat, and that's what leaves you wanting more. I'm intrigued, man. You think Cat is the more valuable of the two between him and Gobert?
Like I said, I think it's very, very close. But when you think about the peak impact that you can get from Cat, I do think that it is higher than that you can get from Gobert. He can be the best player on the floor in a game with that sort of stakes, and Rudy can change any game defensively. But he's going to struggle to be the best player on the floor probably just because of his offensive limitations.
And Cat can be a number two. Like, I'm confident that he can be a number two. That's why I want the Timberwolves to keep this thing together. You talk about them getting matched up with Denver. I think they have a really good recipe for contention, right? I don't think Cat is done improving. And I don't mean improving in the sense... Yeah, me too, brother. In the sense that he's not going to get any new skills or anything, but it's like what you were mentioning with the consistency aspect. I think he can improve in that regard. Playing smarter basketball, playing more controlled, just playing more bread and butter, not getting out of his element, so to speak, right? You talk about him dribbling way too much, where it's not even... Yeah. It's not shiftiness. It's not changing pace. He's not getting wiggly out here. He's just lowering his shoulder and pounding the rock into the earth.
Offensive foul.
Literally. And it's going to get better. I loved what the Timberwolves did in the draft, adding Dillingham and adding Terrence Shannon Jr. They retained a lot of their assets. This works. And, yeah, I think...
He's got to hold up his end of the bargain. He's got to be better in a Western Conference Finals. Way better than he was this year. So does Ant, by the way. But
100%.
Cat's
100%.
the one who's always going to get all the ire. He's the one who people are going to point at because everybody loves Ant and everybody hates Cat. And guess what? It sucks. Do I think it's unfair? Yeah, but if you don't perform, you don't perform. And when you have the sort of expectations, when you have the sort of talent that Cat does, you got to perform better than that, man, in the biggest series of your life.
And when you give us the glimpses that leave us salivating, wanting for more, it makes it that much more difficult because we saw it. You showed it to us, Cat. Can you do it consistently? That's the real question that's going to get him higher on this list. But
if he were on your centers list, where do you think he would be?
9. I slightly prefer Gobert a little bit more just because of the baseline he gives me. I would bump Allen off. I would bump Turner to 10, and I think I'd have Cat at my 9 spot. So he'd definitely make my list. I just marginally prefer Gobert a little bit right now.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I do think that what you get from Gobert on the defensive end is so consistent, and Cat is sort of inherently inconsistent. But that ceiling, man, and I'm hoping that a more consistent playoff run is coming. I want to see more back-to-the-basket Cat as opposed to face-up Cat. And the three-point shooting, I hate it when people complain about Cat shooting threes. It's like, what is this, 1995? Oh, my God, he's 7 feet tall. Why is he shooting threes? He's a 40% three-point shooter. And he was shooting 50% through the better part of the first 2 rounds. There isn't a better shot for him. Like, he can take those all he wants. He's a lethal weapon. It's about playing composed basketball inside the arc, efficient basketball inside the arc, using his physical advantages in a way where he's not over dribbling, he's not lowering his shoulder and getting in danger of turning the ball over, committing an offensive foul. Because you see it. I mean, when he just commits to getting deep position out of the post, quick catch, quick attack, get to that hook shot, it's much more effective than when he catches the ball 18 feet out and tries to face up from there. That's really where I want to see Cat improve that and stop fouling.
Yeah. Cat, we're getting too old for this shit.
Stop fouling. Okay. So you have Gobert at 8. You have Chet at 7.
Yeah.
In my number 7 spot, Logan, I have Domantas Sabonis. And I didn't think you would like it. And I can't really emphasize enough how small the margin is between 7 and 10. And when I think about like Gobert's defensive impact, yeah, it very nearly does move me more than what Sabonis brings you on the offensive end. But he is one of the best offensive centers in basketball, and the production is outstanding. 19, 14, and 8 on 64% true shooting. Like, the box score, right, is always going to be ridiculous. That's where you get the Kendrick Perkins takes. That's where you get some of the analytics love pushing.
Defensive Player of the Year, Domantas Sabonis, man.
Defensive Player of the Year, according to one Spanish reporter who is perhaps romantically involved with Arvidas or something, or would like to be, vote Sabonis for literally everything. I'm definitely not on that side of the issue. I do still have concerns, and I have problems with Domantas Sabonis, even as an offensive player. And the biggest issue there is just his limitations as a high-end scorer, because he does rely as a post-up player on brute force. And when there is somebody who can match his physicality, I mean, he is a hyper-physical basketball player, but the playoffs allow for more physical defense. You're more likely to be going up against really high-end defensive centers. You're more likely to draw a Draymond Green, for example, in the playoff series that we saw from him. And that's where he struggles. He's a 33rd percentile post-up scorer, which really is not good for a star who is posting up at the volume that he is. And as you mentioned, he's not a real floor spacer, right? His jump shooting numbers in terms of efficiency look fine, but he makes one jumper a game. So he is not holding defenses accountable for playing off of him, which they will do in the playoffs, which we saw very clearly in the Warriors series. I am excited, though, for Sabonis to have the opportunity to be a third option as a scorer in Sacramento this coming year, because I think adding another dynamic ball handler and shot maker like DeMar DeRozan takes that burden off of Domas to give you 20 points every night and allows him to still have a super pronounced offensive impact, because he is an elite screener. He is an elite passing big. People who try to compare him to Jokic should probably be drawn and quartered and hung in Town Square, because, like, just watch. I mean, just don't look at the assist numbers. Actually watch the level of playmaking that is going on. Domantas Sabonis gets a lot of assists off of handoffs. He does. He's also very good at spotting cutters. He is a very, very good passer. He's capable of pushing in transition. He's a very good ball handler for his size. And so there is still a production and efficiency as a scorer, combined with this really high level playmaking, combined with this elite rebounding, combined with the fact that he's always going to have his limitations defensively. He'll never be a real plus on that end, but he does play really hard, makes him passable on that end. When I compare him to Cat, I do think that there is a stability, a consistency that comes with Sabonis on the back of his playmaking. Whereas with Cat, it's like there's nights where it's just, man, I mean, jacking up bad shots, playing out of control. It's just a steadier value that you get from Sabonis. And I do think that overall Sabonis is overrated, which is tough because sometimes guys get overrated and everybody then agrees that they're overrated and they become underrated. And I feel like maybe that's what you've done with Sabonis here. Like, I'm sorry, bro. Myles Turner over him is clinically insane. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. That's clinically insane. That's situation bias. That's anti-Sabonis slander. And you've taken it too far. But all these other dudes who we're talking about in this range, I can definitely see the case. Sabonis has never been a dude to have a pronounced on-off impact, right? Like his teams are basically always hovering around a neutral difference in terms of their net rating with him on and off the court. There's really no difference. But I don't want to ignore the fact that, he came to Sacramento. He pioneered the number one offense in basketball. He was pivotal to the transformation of that identity. And let's give him another shot in the playoffs. Like, I think the Warriors series was kind of the worst case scenario, right? Draymond is a very tough draw for him. He was ice cold as a jump shooter in that series. I do think if we see him back, I still have the same concerns, but I do think they would be less pronounced. So 7 feels okay for me. He's so productive. He's more consistent than the dudes who I have below him.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I completely agree. I'm not ready to just sell all of my Sabonis stock. Now, what is it going to take for him to crack my list to climb high on here? I think the Kings need to maintain an above-average defense, which they were last year. They were 14th in defensive rating. That is a massive improvement from 25th, where they were when they made the playoffs and lost to the Warriors. I love the addition of DeMar DeRozan. I know people are talking about the shooting concerns. Sabonis is unique in the sense that he is just good at creating advantages for these guys out of handoffs. You mentioned the screening. Like, the Kings' offense is just going to help manufacture looks, easy ones, for these guys. And DeMar is really talented at making tough shots. Okay, well, let's spoon feed him some easy ones. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that with another opportunity, Sabonis can be better and can improve. And I'm going to be honest, this last year, you talk about him playing hard, I think that was direct correlation to his shortcomings in the playoff run, and I think he played all year with a massive, massive chip on his shoulder. Let me argue the Turner thing, though. Okay. I think Myles Turner is a little bit more matchup proof than Sabonis. And I'm just going to use a small example here. You talk about him matching up with Draymond. The floor spacing is a concern. You just can't run complete drop like you can versus Sabonis. I'm going to live with a Sabonis jump shot every single day of the week. You can't do that against Myles Turner. And this is a small example, but I think it's a good one. Sabonis matched up 4 times against Ivica Zubac this last season. And you're talking about that brute force. When a guy can match up with him physically, his offensive advantage is a little bit negated. And he's not a complete bozo. Against Zubac, he still put up 16, 13, and he had 7 assists per game. But he shot 40% from the field. He shot 22% from deep, and he had a true shooting percentage of 48%. That's the one thing I want to emphasize is I just think against these big men that can match up with him physically, Sabonis just really struggles to score. And that to me is really problematic. I don't think Myles Turner's ever going to have that issue because he has something that you can take away. He's big as hell, and he can just shoot over everybody. And I think that's really valuable to have at the 5 spot. Maybe I am tripping a little bit. Yeah, maybe my Kings bias is showing. Maybe my pro-Halliburton agenda and propaganda is still being pushed and peddled here. But I just think Turner's a little bit more matchup proof. He has something that you can't really take away. You can kind of negate Sabonis as a scorer in certain matchups, and that's problematic to me in a playoff series.
I just think the gap in rebounding value and the gap in playmaking value is so massive that it is far more significant than the fact that I would probably agree that Turner is a slightly better pure scorer because that jump shooting value is just so pure. It's so consistent. But also, I mean, when you talk about Tyrese Halliburton, man, like I found the stat at one point, but the leap in production between Turner with Hallie and without him, it's pretty significant. And again, he's really getting all of his value on the offensive side. Not all of it, but that is where he is slanted as a basketball player. Who's the better offensive player? Who can transform an offense more? I think it's by far Domantas Sabonis. I think you're probably viewing this from the perspective of, I don't want Domantas Sabonis to be the second best player on my basketball team, right? You're wincing. What are we wincing at? Come on, say it. Say it.
I believe I've found the numbers.
Well, let's hear them.
Without Halliburton, Turner goes down to 14 points, 6 boards on 56% true shooting.
It helps to play with Tyrese Halliburton, Logan. It helps to play with Tyrese Halliburton. Not everybody gets to do it. Some people have to be traded for Tyrese Halliburton, and then everybody hates them for the rest of time. Yeah, I know that you know. I know that you know. And this is a crazy take. I'm not going to lie to you. Respect Domas a little bit more than this, for goodness sakes. But I do have conflicted feelings about having him up at number 7 because I probably don't want him to be the second best player on my team. God,
Luckily,
it's
he
tough.
might not.
This is a
Luckily,
tough
he might
list.
not have to do that anymore. Luckily, he might not have to do that anymore, man.
At least he doesn't have to be your number 2 scorer. At
100%.
least he doesn't have that because I
100%.
certainly don't want him to have to be in that role. Yeah, it's tough. Tough list. Know the beautiful thing about being a sports fan? There's only like 2 days the whole year without a game. 2. With so much happening and so much action, that makes just about every day game day at DraftKings Sportsbook.
It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your team, and place your first bet. It really couldn't be any easier or any simpler. Baseball, golf, UFC, there's something for every fan of every sport to bet on at DraftKings. And I know it's early, but football season will be here before you know it.
And if you're new to DraftKings, you gotta check this out. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Okay, let's move into the number 6 spot, Logan. Who do you have there?
Number 7, big gap. Number 6. In my 6th spot is Bam Adebayo, and I was a little bit conflicted with this one between 5 and 6.
Wow.
I have a gentleman who's a little bit better offensively at my next spot, and if availability was a concern, I think I definitely would have Adebayo one spot higher, but he just is really still limited offensively, and I like Bam, man. And he'll give you the flashes. Oh, he'll give you the flashes, man. Some of the passing, some of the turnarounds and the jump shooting, and you're like, damn, man, I think Bam's putting it together, but there's still just inconsistency with his offensive game, which limits him from climbing higher on my list. He shot just 35% overall on jump shots last season. He shot 34% out of the mid-range. He's just an average efficiency post scorer. And so those limitations are real to me. It's always just going to be a little bit janky with Bam, man. It's always a post turnaround where he's rising and firing, and he'll have games. There's no doubt, man. He'll have his games where he's on, and you're like, wow, this is legitimate improvement. I have yet to really be convinced by that. But the one thing that Bam has going for him is he is one of the handful of best defensive players on planet Earth. And when I think about the Defensive Player of the Year awards over the past couple of seasons, the one that goes to Jaren Jackson Jr., the one that goes to Marcus Smart, I kind of look back at those and I go, damn, man. Like, Bam and AD probably should have won one or both of those in terms of just raw impact. I don't know if I agree with either of those awards in hindsight. Maybe Jaren. Jaren had an insane season. Marcus Smart, I think, is probably a little bit worse, but
Marcus Smart is the worst decoy ever.
Bam and AD are probably going to be like 2 of the greatest defenders to never lock down that, along with Tim Duncan, because Tim Duncan obviously never gets one either.
Scotty never got one.
Scotty never got one.
Yeah.
That's diabolical. But they're going to be in that handful, that pantheon. That's probably the Mount Rushmore right now, unless I'm blanking on somebody.
Theo Ratliff never got one. It is crazy, though, dude. You do look through the course of history, and it's just like monster shot blockers win over and over, and great defensive wings or great defensive bigs who don't have crazy block numbers never win. And AD is kind of the toughest to explain because he has had it all, and he's just never gotten one.
And Bam's unique in the sense that I don't know if we've ever seen a guy at the 5 spot that is. Do you think Ben Wallace is comparable in that respect, or do you think Bam just completely clear?
In terms of switchability?
Yeah.
Bam is clear.
I mean, Bam's one of the best you've ever seen, and it's so fun watching those defensive possessions where he switches on to every single ball handler. He just blows shit up. He's super disruptive, and I think he gets overlooked because Bam doesn't have the overwhelming block shot totals. He doesn't have the overwhelming steals totals, but his impact is immense. And when you were talking about like one-man potential defenses, there are not many guys that I would take over Bam. But when I look at everybody above him, I think there is a little bit of a rim protection gap. Those guys are just bigger, longer, stronger. They're comparable as rebounders. And with everybody above him, there is a significant offensive gap. I don't know if Bam's ever going to figure it out, man. When he was in year 3, year 4, and I'm sitting there watching the little post turnarounds, and I'm getting a little giddy, and I'm getting a little bit excited, and I'm thinking, man, if he builds on this and this can be his foundation, there's something there. He just hasn't had enough of a substantial leap. Like Domas, he's a good playmaker. He's a good passer. He's not on Domas's level, obviously, but he's great with handoffs. He's good at spotting cutters. You can run actions and offense through him. Especially when Jimmy Butler's out and you see him with other guys out, they'll run offense through him at the top of the key, and he is capable of doing that. But there's still a little bit of a gap there. So Bam's in this little bit of a tweener range to me, Carson. He's an elite defender, but he's still limited offensively, and that's why, for me, he cannot be any higher. But like I said at the top of this, I would hear an argument for him at number 5.
So I have him at number 5, and I know who you have at number 5 because these two dudes are going to be in the same range. Here's why I prefer Bam to KP. And I am a huge KP guy. I mean, I presume that's who you have in the 5 spot, right? And by the way, I think a lot of people might think that that is crazy. I don't think the gap between these two is nearly as big as most people probably. And part of that is that I am extremely high on KP because I think he does a lot of the key things that we talk about that you look for at the center position at an elite level. I do think, though, you have to consider situation. And when you talk about Bam's offensive frustrations, I get it, and I'm there with you. However, we also have to look at the situation, and we have to look at the lack of creation alongside him and the burden that has been put on him to try to become a 20-point-per-game scorer, to try to do so consistently with self-created offense, right? And he has grown in that respect. He has improved as a ball handler, and he still does have a good bit of offensive game. Like, if we're talking about the elite defensive guys, right, it goes without saying, but the offensive gap between him and a Rudy Gobert is absolutely massive. He shot 56% on floaters this past year. He shot just over 43% on all 2-point jumpers. He was a 68th percentile isolation creator and remarkably only ran 36 pick and rolls, Logan, but as the ball handler, a 98th percentile pick and roll creator in terms of efficiency. And you saw in that Celtics series, like sometimes it was Bam, we need you to basically operate as a big playmaking wing. He is capable of doing that. Is it a good option for your offense? No, that's not what you want him to be doing. But that's kind of the point. They haven't gotten the guy who could optimize him. Imagine him playing with a Trae Young, right? Imagine him playing with a lead ball handler, an elite playmaker. He has all the tools to be a fantastic vertical spacer. He's always been a freak athlete, great lob finisher, but he doesn't have those looks manufactured for him with nearly the volume that you would like him to. So he has just done so much to help drag these underwhelmingly talented Miami teams to deep playoff runs, to the finals, often on the back of the defense being their strength, which he is clearly the most important part of. Oftentimes, like, their defensive personnel is not that impressive alongside him and Jimmy. They play their asses off. They're smart. The coaching is brilliant, but you're not talking about, again, great personnel. He has freakish switchability. It's the best that we've ever seen from a big Kevin Garnett. Well, he's top 2, okay? He's top 2 in terms of switchability. One of the most versatile defenders that we've ever seen. He's captained 4 straight top 10 defenses. And you mentioned the rim protection is not what you get from some of these elite pure rim protectors. And I feel like sometimes Heat fans just like overlook that fact. And they're like, Bam guards in space way better than these guys, and he's also an elite rim protector. And he's not. He gives you under a block a game. He only holds opposing players 6% below their average around the rim. But I do think that he's better than that number might just reflect. I think that his instincts are excellent. He's a high-impact interior defender, great rebounder, absurdly high-effort defensive player, just does everything. And then if you need a guy to check Giannis, think about what he did in that 2023 series. Just absolutely stonewalled him in the key moments of like the closeout game when Giannis was on the floor, because he's such an athlete. He's so strong. He moves his feet so well. Really was like the best one-on-one defender for Giannis that you could ask for. When he drew Tatum and Brown, he defended those guys very well on that run. Like, he just changes the game completely on that side and is so much more versatile than KP on that end. KP is a great pure rim protector, but there's not a coverage that I'm not comfortable with Bam playing. And I know that every single night you cannot possibly exploit him. He is going to have an elite impact where it's like, KP, I worry about guarding out in space. And if Bam were in a more privileged offensive situation with that athleticism, with that playmaking, with that ball handling, with the fact that he does have that touch, he does have some of that shot making, I think that it would be pretty clear, the difference between the two, relatively clear at least. And we're seeing him with Team USA right now. It's kind of the perfect environment for him because the more talent you put around him, the better he gets, the less that you require him to try to be your number 2 offensively, and he can do every little thing at such a high level. Like, that's just such a winning basketball player. So that's why I can't have him higher than 5, because of his offensive inconsistency. The 2022 finals run, the 2023 finals run, he was under 18 a night on 53% true shooting. When that touch shot making is off, it can be rough. But again, he's not getting much created for him in Miami. I do think he could be more efficient in different situations with legit pick and roll creation. And by the way, we're seeing flashes of floor spacing now. You talk about you wanting Bam to improve. 15 of 42 from deep this past year. We're seeing that jump shooting with Team USA right now. He just turned 27. I only see opportunities for him to get better. So as much as I love KP, like, Bam has, in 2 separate playoff runs, even with his offensive limitations, played at the level of a top 20 guy, been transformative defensively. He's an all-world defender. He's a high-end passing big. He's a great athlete who also has offensive skill. I can't have him below my 5 spot.
It's a money argument. It's a money argument, man. I'm not going to lie. You got me reconsidering it a little bit. I'm still going to rock with KP, though. I mean,
He's rocking with KP, though.
He is a...
I love me some KP. I love me some KP.
He's a nightmare matchup, man. I mean, you saw it in this run, and I completely agree with you about the situation. That's the biggest detail that makes me reconsider this, just because, damn, man, they don't have anybody who can really create any kind of dribble penetration from the perimeter, who can, create Bam, and he looks, everything. That's a phenomenal point, because so many other guys do play with, like, at least a good lead ball handler, somebody who is competent at creating opportunities. Bam has... really nobody. That's not disrespectful to, like, Tyler Hero or anything, but it's like Hero is not a guy who's going to get downhill. Terry Rozier's not getting downhill, man. These are tough buckets, right? When Jimmy's out there, sure, but...
And the playmaking.
Yeah.
He's never played with an elite playmaker.
Exactly. And Bam's been consistently great as the number 2. I just think there's enough of an offensive gap. We've mentioned these stats a myriad of times on the show. The best post-up scorer in basketball, the best mismatch attacker in basketball. You see this throughout the playoff run in the finals. Like, KP gets very little burn. You put a little dude on him, he can just shoot over him. And he is an elite shooter of the basketball from mid-range, from behind the arc. I really value the mismatch attacking that KP brings you, and the straight-up rim protection. He's one of the best rim protectors in all of basketball. Statistically, inside 6 feet, I believe he was the best. In basketball this last season, nearly 2 blocks a night. And so he is bringing you a ton of value. I agree with you, he's in a privileged situation, but KP's gotten a lot better from his Dallas days, man. And yeah, I think he's a bit of a better rim protector straight up. I agree with you, Bam just completely clears as an overall defender, but those are probably the 2 things that I value the most at the center spot, and KP does them at an elite level, so that's why I have him at 5. The floor spacing, the rim protection. If I factored in availability, KP would slide to my 6 spot, Bam would slide to my 5, but I think I slightly prefer KP's skill set to Bam's.
KP is the better offensive player, not by as much as Bam is the better defensive player, in my opinion. But when you think about what you want from your center, you said it, elite rim protection, check. Elite post-up play. He was the most efficient post-up player in basketball, 1.3 points per post-up. So you can't switch, right? I mean, you think about what Dallas was doing in game 1. It was just laughable. He shoots over top of these guys. He shoots 60% on these turnaround and face-up jumpers. He draws fouls at an obscene rate, too. You get up in his airspace, he just doesn't mind. He will turn and fire right over you. That's an insane weapon. It destroys teams. You want floor spacing. He's almost 38% from deep, and he pulls from deep range at 7'3". So there's an extra level of stress that it applies to the defense. He's a 78th percentile spot-up player. You want a dude who can roll and pop very effectively? He's got that. He's a super efficient finisher as a roller, and he's a great pick-and-pop big, of course. And he was the 3rd most efficient 18-point-per-game scorer this past year, behind Jokic and Giannis. So I think it'll surprise more people that I have KP at 6. I think that'll be surprising enough on its own. I think you having him above Bam will add another layer to that, because he doesn't produce in the box score at the level of Domantas Sabonis. He doesn't produce in the box score at the level of Karl-Anthony Towns, but my God, he is a hyper-efficient, hyper-versatile offensive weapon who nobody has an answer for, who is way improved from his Dallas days, as you mentioned, who protects the rim at an extremely high level. He's an average defender in space, maybe even a little bit worse than that. He's an average rebounder for the 5 spot. But overall, he comes pretty close to epitomizing the skill set you want from a modern big, unless they're, an absolute freak talent, a Jokic, an Embiid, whatever. And I can just bank on that in a way that I can't bank on Sabonis or Cat, because both of them are offensively too inconsistent. I can't bank on from Chet and Gobert, because while they are both better defenders, KP is still a really high-level defender who's an awesome offensive player, where they both have their clear issues there, especially Gobert. And unfortunately, I just think the fact that Boston went out there and they won the title, even with KP playing limited minutes because he was hurt, is going to make him underrated, because people will look and they'll say, first of all, he didn't prove it on the big stage because he didn't have a chance to outside of game 1, in which he was the best player on the floor. But they'll just say, all right, they won it without him. They didn't need him. That Boston team was so talented, and they were so much more talented than Dallas and the teams they faced in the East that, yeah, I guess they didn't. But I think they could have gone down damn near any of their 5 key guys, and they would have been just fine. Like, they were that good. I don't think they could have gone down Jason Tatum. They probably couldn't have gone down Jaylen Brown with the level he was playing at. But, Drew, Derek White, like, that team was just so talented. I did think KP was their second best player throughout the regular season. I wish that we had gotten to see it fleshed out in the playoffs, because what we did see, again, in game 1 was absolutely ludicrous. I'm super high on his skill set. I'm super high on his winning impact. I feel good about him at 6. I couldn't put him above Bam, though.
Oh, man, I agonized over number 4.
Wow, you're a crazy bastard, Logan Camden. And if you say one name, I'm going to flip my lid.
Are you?
I don't think you are. I think you're going to say the name that I have.
I have Victor Wembanyama in my 4 spot.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. If you had Wemby over AD, I would have flipped my lid a little.
I couldn't do it after AD's playoff run, because this has been the most I've been impressed with Anthony Davis since the title run, really. Like, he has been kind of underwhelming. He wasn't. But I do want to be clear. I think that Wemby versus AD is a real conversation, and I think it's going to heat up into next season. If AD keeps pace, if he plays like he did last season, can hold, but it's also like, man, how much better is Wemby going to get? Now, I want to be clear about why I think it's close. One, the fact that the Spurs are introducing a guy like Chris Paul into the system, say what you want about Chris Paul at this stage in his career, he is clearly not the player he once was, but he's going to manufacture looks for Wemby. Mm-hmm. It's such a high level. Wemby did not have that luxury in his rookie season. It was basically Pop sabotaging him by playing him with Jeremy Sohan at the point and saying, hey, Wemby, go figure it out. Just go get your own looks. Now, with an actual legitimate good decision maker and good point guard in there, I think Wemby's going to thrive even more and have even more easy looks generated for him. The second reason is just the physical advantages that he has over him. You can't teach size. You can't teach length. It's one of the biggest selling points of Wemby. He's a freak, man. He's a freak. He's 7'4". How long is his wingspan? Like 8 foot?
Yeah.
Ridiculous. There are just physical advantages that Wemby possesses over Anthony Davis is going to give him easy looks. Elite lob finishing from anywhere on the floor. You can just kind of sling it up near the rim. Wemby will find it. He'll go get it. He's got those Mr. Fantastic arms, man. That's actually probably Wemby's superhero comp, man. He's Mr. Fantastic, dude.
Yeah,
Stretch
Captain Underpants, one of the two.
Stretch Armstrong. That's why it was a debate to me. The level of rim protector that he is already at because of his overwhelming length. He was 7th in rim protection inside 6 feet. Again, the length, he can just disrupt shots that nobody else in the world can. And it's really hard to defend him. The reason that I don't have him above AD is the physical maturity, the strength, and the bread and butter looks. I still think AD can get to those looks basically at will out of the post. And he is so freaking strong. I still think he's the best defender in basketball, but I really contemplated this one. And I think that how Wemby is ascending, man, it could be a real conversation as quickly as next season. I think we'll probably stand pat. I think Wemby will be 4 next year. I think AD will still be 3. But it's very, very close, man. You can't teach the things and the advantages that Wemby has, man, at his size.
You sure can't, man. And then I'm just going to read off some numbers that are going to blow your mind, Logan. And I've probably said them before, but, you've decimated your memory with that marijuana, so you're not going to remember it. It'll be like you're seeing it for the first time all over again. Since moving to center on December 8th, Wemby averaged 22.5 points, 11 rebounds,
you should read
and
the post.
4.5 assists per game.
You should read the post-All-Star break numbers.
Well, okay, buddy. Wait until you hear the per 36 numbers, pal. Don't steal my thunder. On 58% true shooting with 3.9 blocks per game in just 29 minutes per game. So per 36, that's 27.3 points, 13.4 rebounds, 5.4 assists, and 4.8 blocks per game. That is over 52 games. That's basically 2/3 of the man's rookie season. He is a top 3 defender on the planet, completely destructive rim protector, as you mentioned. I don't know that anybody causes opponents to adjust their offensive approach more than Wemby because of just his overwhelming size and length. Gobert is a more disciplined defender at this stage, right? But when you think about the adjustments that a Nikola Jokic, for example, had to make in terms of his approach versus Wemby catching the ball from beyond the three-point line and trying to get into these running floaters, being just very concerted about not having to deal with that length around the rim, more so than he is with anybody else. Just the overall deterrence factor, it is so impactful. And offensively, it's again the size and the length that is the single biggest thing, because we can gush about the skill as we should. The man shot 46% on step back threes and over 37% on all pull-up threes. That's disgusting. He was a 77th percentile isolation creator, 37th percentile pick and roll, which isn't good, but it's not bad. And he's a 7'4" rookie, and he can shoot over the top of you. But he also, I would say, got more efficient and compact as a ball handler, more comfortable as a driver throughout his rookie year. And he can see everything as a passer, and he's a pretty inventive passer. The laydown passes that you see from him, like, it's legit stuff. He's already one of the best passing bigs in the NBA. But again, it's just like that ability to have such easy offense when you're just playing with a capable playmaker, because the catch radius is like nothing that we've seen around the rim. That is only going to become more and more prevalent and going to make him more and more efficient as he plays with Chris Paul, and then as he plays with higher end guards throughout his career. He's also the best transition scoring big in basketball already, because he moves down the floor like a gazelle. And the impact as a rookie was already so pronounced. +7 on off. My favorite stat, everybody's favorite stat about the Point Sohan experiment, how it didn't work. But when Wemby and Trey Jones were on the floor together, which is a huge sample size, they were a +4 net rating team. They were legitimately good with that roster, just when you put him with a capable point guard. There's obviously areas to improve. Wemby can still become more consistent as a shooter, because he was just over 32% from deep on the year overall. He will improve as a post player, and he needs to. He's still inefficient there, 29th percentile. Part of that is adding more strength, bulking up, which I do think he will do. Part of the shooting issues as well is shot selection, shot quality, which will get better with him maturing, becoming more physical, him playing with better ball handlers and playmakers. I do think he can become a little bit more disciplined defensively, not chase blocks quite as much. And he can take better care of the basketball, because he did average 3.7 turnovers a game, which is a lot. And that's with a lot of responsibility. Again, I think it needs to be about creating easier stuff for him going forward. But he's got to take better care of the basketball. But I love Bam. I respect Bam so much. I just think the talent is so overwhelming with Wemby. Like, when I think about what he could do just next year, right, just with CP3, the pick and pop game, he could easily shoot over 35% from deep at 7'4" and be an unstoppable lob target as a roller, who can also hit pull-up threes at a good clip, who can attack off the bounce, who can facilitate with self-created offense while being a top 3 defender on the planet. Like, we're talking about what we expect from him going into year 2. It's ridiculous. I think he's already a top 20 for sure. Borderline top 15 player. I'm with you. AD is more physically mature, more polished, and that is why he still has the edge at this point, and it's not that close to me. But Wemby is obviously one of the greatest talents that we've ever seen, and I think he's going to go down as one of the greatest players ever.
He also shot worse off catch and shoot attempts than he did off of the dribble from behind the arc. Again,
he embraces the challenge.
Yeah, I think he's going to get even better there, man. I think Wemby's going to be the best player on planet Earth one day, man. I don't know when that day comes, but it's going to be probably sooner rather than later, man.
Not far away. I'm going to say year 4 Wemby is the best player on the planet. Would you like to add anything about AD at number 3?
Just a few more things about the playoff run. 16 boards a night, 28 points, 4 assists, was the Lakers' best player, 67% true shooting. It was just finally so vindicating for Anthony Davis. The fact that we got this kind of... again, it wasn't a run. It was one series, but damn, he struggled against Jokic in this last matchup, and I just thought he did a so much better job of holding his own defensively as best you can against a guy like Jokic, the best offensive player on planet Earth, but he was so much better offensively. That's what we had been asking AD to do. Wasn't passive, was super aggressive, took over when the team needed him, and kept games close. You couldn't have asked AD to do anything more in the first round series that the Lakers played, and that's what I was waiting for all year long. After some disappointing moments in the playoffs, he proved it, and it is that physical maturity. It's the overwhelming impact he can have everywhere defensively. I still think he's the best defender in basketball. AD's a monster, but there are offensive limitations in terms of floor spacing and just reliability that you get with the two guys above him. So I don't think that's particularly close. I think you're looking at two of the best players in all of basketball with the top two guys on this list. But AD deserves his respect, man. He's still one of the top 10 players on planet Earth to me.
I think I'm with you, dude. When we did our top 10 players at the end of the regular season, I had him in that 10 spot. I really, really love AD. I think he's playing at an incredibly high level and gave you 25, 12.5, and 3.5 on 62% true shooting this regular season. You mentioned the playoff numbers, but his skilled shot making really has improved. It was crazy in the playoffs, but in the regular season, almost 52% on floaters, 49% on hook shots, 43% on 2-point jumpers. Really solid numbers all around. And on top of that, he's third in the league in restricted area makes per game. He's a super effective roll man. He's a 68th percentile post-up scorer, and he's one of the few best defenders on the planet. So I thought that there were some disappointing aspects of this playoff series, as awesome as he was as a shot maker, and the production as a scorer and on the glass is just insane. But he really, really quieted down the stretches of these games. Fourth quarters, you get 3 points per game from him on 35% shooting. And I did think it was the weakest defensive showing that we've seen from him, coming off of the best defensive run of his career and one of the best defensive runs that we've seen in a long time in this league in 2023. But he's obviously still one of the league's best there. Elite rim protector, guards very well in space, 96th percentile post defender. There's a gap offensively between him and the top two, though. There's just a different level of stress that they place on defense, a different level of consistent dominance of overall scoring and of playmaking, and just a consistency as well, because AD was really, really good offensively in this postseason and really good in the regular season. But 2023, right, it was a much more up and down experience offensively. So I think he's locked into that 3 spot. I still think there's a gap between him and Wemby. I think there's a gap between him and the top 2, though. Should we have the Embiid Jokic debate for the 18,000th time? Maybe we speed run it this time.
Yeah, let's do it. I don't care what Stephen A's got to say, man. Embiid over Jokic is inarguable, and if someone
Stephen
says
A. just say that? Did Stephen A. just say that?
He said I would take Embiid over Jokic. And
when did he say this?
This was on some podcast I saw.
A podcast? Gross. How much is Ben Franklin paying him for these takes? Come on now, buddy.
They are lying. I think it is sensationalism. I think it is rage bait. The gap to me, we're talking about gaps. The gap to me between Embiid and Jokic is large. Shout out to Embiid for this playoff run. Shout out to him for how he protects the rim. There's a reason he's number 2 on this list. Jokic already climbed the mountain. Embiid has not. Embiid has yet to be to a conference finals. And you know what? We can do all the facts. We can do all the numbers. The concrete point to me between Embiid and Jokic is the ease of the offense. When you were watching these games, Philadelphia's offense stagnates. And Embiid will pound that rock on the low block and just wait there for, a cool 10 to 15 seconds. And their offense devolves into that a lot. That's never the case with Denver, man. Like, it is never the case. That offense never stagnates. The ball is always moving. There is such a there's a selflessness, and there is a beauty to Denver's offense that you just don't get. You couple that with the fact that Jokic is probably the best tough shot maker in the league and the best post scorer in the league and one of the strongest dudes in the league. I don't care that he had a down jump shooting run. That doesn't really matter to me. Like, Embiid has done nothing to surpass him or possesses a skill set that puts him over him. I just think it's inarguable at this point. And the final thing that I'll add to this is one of the points that I make a lot about Embiid, but is the foul baiting and the aesthetics of the play. That's a component of this to me, man. It is just a part of the Embiid experience. Down to Team USA, Embiid. Damn, man. It's embarrassing. I get it if Trae Young is doing the foul grifting thing or if Austin Reeves is doing it. Trae Young is like $160 soaking wet, man. He's got to get whatever fouls he can get. Austin Reeves, is what, 6'4", like $180. All right, I get it with those guys. Embiid, you're 7'1", 290, flopping around like a fish. You're not going to get these calls. And I hope he takes it to heart, the Team USA experience. You should not get these calls, my man. And it's just embarrassing to me that he grifts so hard, and that is such a fundamental part of his game. Until he stops doing that, I'm not even going to consider it, man. Well, hell, man, until he wins a ring and wins Finals MVP, I'm not ready to have this debate because Jokic already did all that. So all of this comes together, man. But the foul baiting, the aesthetics of his game, the stagnation of Philadelphia's offense, all of that is a huge component why I can't put Embiid above Jokic. And like I said at the top, if anybody says that, I think they're a BSer, man. I think they're full of BS, and I think they're lying to the audience and to themselves, and I think you should stop listening to them immediately, man. I don't think you can make the argument right now.
Oh, Logan brings cancel culture to basketball. Any diversity of opinion he squashes and urges his far-left mob to burn them at the stake. I won't stand for it. I have Embiid at number 1. No, I don't. Of course I don't. What are we doing here? Of course I don't. Come on. Everybody knows that I have Nikola Jokic at number 1. I do want to give props to Embiid, though. I mean, this was one of the great regular seasons before he got hurt that we have ever seen. He was averaging damn near 35, 11, and 6 on 64% true shooting. Ridiculous. There's just an overwhelming combination of size and skill from this guy. As you mentioned, like 7'1", 300 pounds, who also shot 48% from mid-range. Just ridiculous face-up game between the shot making and the foul drawing. 39% from deep. He was a 92nd percentile spot-up player. Phenomenal post hub, phenomenal isolation hub, comfortable ball handling at that size. Improved as a jump shooter, improved as a playmaker, an elite pure interior defender. Like, Embiid is one of the 5 best players on planet Earth. I agree with you, though, in terms of the postseason gap, and it's not a question of Embiid getting a ring, right? We can't view things in simple terms like that. Jokic has one, Embiid doesn't. Christian Brown also has one, right? Jim Laskadov has one. I'm not giving you... Jim Laskadov actually has a lot. I'm not going to give you my take on Jumpin' Jim over Joel Embiid here today, but it is about the individual performance. And this year was mostly a positive. It was the most productive we've seen Embiid. His jumper mostly came through, which had not been the case in the previous couple playoffs. His playmaking was better, and he did this all while he was hurt, with a supporting cast that outside of Tyrese Maxey really wasn't all that skilled offensively. Still, he had his issues. He made 1 field goal per game in fourth quarters and shot 23% there. So the shot making did fail him some when it mattered most. He still averaged over 4.2 turnovers per game, and he did struggle some with the double teams, as we've seen from him historically in the postseason. He had that 9 turnover performance in Game 5 and was just brutal in the fourth, and Maxey bailed him out with an absolute masterclass. So we just haven't seen him reach that Jokic level, even in terms of two-way impact, where it's just like Jokic's offensive greatness is so pantheon level. I would argue the best ever. It is so inevitable. And Embiid has never approached that in the postseason, because even though this year was an improvement, right, it's still clearly levels below what you get from Jokic. And the previous two postseasons from Embiid were really rough. That's when he's averaging 0.7 points per jumper, under 0.6 points per jumper. Brutal stuff. That's when he's giving you a negative assist to turnover ratio, really struggling with the double teams, averaging under 24 points per game when he's up above 30 in the regular season. I think he's improved. I think he's progressed as a basketball player. But the totality of the resume that we've seen in recent years from these guys, there's still a big difference. I do believe that Jokic is the better pure scorer in the playoffs. He's been more productive, more efficient year after year because his edge as a shot maker, right, being able to get anywhere in the paint and make 65% of those shots, being that dominant a post-up force, not being reliant on getting to the line, that just scales so well. And then you introduce the playmaking gap. And as you mentioned, the ability to play such flowing, versatile offense that enhances everybody around you. To me, there is still a gap between the two. I have a lot of respect for Embiid. I think he is dominant, but I agree. If you're making the case for him over Jokic, I don't think that you respect the insane level of basketball, the all-time great level of basketball that Nikola Jokic is playing and has proven that he can sustain and even take up a level in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Jokic literally just had one of the greatest postseasons in NBA history. Embiid has yet to match anything close to that.
In 2023.
Correct. With that, too, we're still working in theoreticals with Embiid, right? We have yet to see him really, truly put it together over a large sample size. And I'm not out on Embiid by any means. I'm waiting for it. I want him to make it to the playoffs healthy. I hope his body holds up. They do whatever load management, whatever they need to do to make sure that Embiid is good. I still think he is capable of doing it. We just haven't seen it yet. And the final thing I'll say on this debate is I feel like the area where most people would argue Embiid over Jokic is they would go to the rim protection and the defense aspect of it. I agree. I think Embiid is a more impactful defender, but
of course,
Jokic sometimes gets touted as this scrub that can't defend anybody. Oh, he's fat and he's not mobile and he can't move and he can't defend in space. And I just don't think any of that's true. I think he's got good instincts. I think he's got good hands. Was he the most engaged and impactful in these last playoffs? No. I think it was a legitimate step back kind of across the board for Jokic in this playoff run. But again, he was coming from one of the best playoff runs ever. It's hard to repeat that and to do that year over year. And he was still damn good. The two-way impact gap is just nowhere close to being large enough for me to put Embiid over Jokic. And until I see it consistently over a playoff run where Embiid can stay healthy and be dominant, I'm just not ready to, or, unless Jokic retires and wants to go race horses the rest of his life, I'm not going to put Embiid at 1.
No, I think that Nikola Jokic is having one of the greatest peaks in the history of this game, and as I've said, I think that he is probably the best offensive player that this game has seen. If you just look at the level that the Nuggets are at offensively with Jokic on the floor and with any of the other key Nuggets off it, right, they are always an elite offense. When you put any of the other key Nuggets on the floor and take Jokic off it, like you're looking at least a 12-point swing with every one of them. MPJ, Aaron Gordon, Jamal Murray. I've recited the numbers before. I'm going to try not to recite every Jokic number and give a full monologue, but the Nuggets have a plus 20 on-off differential with him over the last 2 seasons. That's stuff we haven't seen since Kevin Garnett carrying those miserable Timberwolves teams. I think a Jokic post-up is the most unstoppable play ever because he's so overwhelmingly strong, because his footwork is so absurd, because his mastery of fakes is so absurd, because his touch is by far the best we've ever seen, and because he is also up there for the best passer in the history of this game. In my opinion, a top 3 passer ever. So that's an unstoppable formula. Then on top of that, he is a damn good shooting big who can do it off movement, curling around screens, who can do it as a popper, who can do it as a spot-up player. He's an 86th percentile pick-and-roll creator, Logan. The inverted pick-and-roll is lethal. He scores with 84th percentile efficiency out of isolation. And you talk about this postseason being a step back from last year, he still gave you 29, 13, and 9 on 61% true shooting. Now, he did not defend at the level that he did the year before, and he did not shoot the ball from the perimeter at the level that he did the year before. He also played 3 games of perfection in a row against not just a dominant defense, a defense that was specifically built to stop him, that clearly has the best personnel to do so. And Jokic had to be better down the stretch of Game 7, but like, that's just because he's so clearly the best player on the planet, and that's what I expect of him. He still gave you 34, 19, and 7 on 55% true shooting. Fine efficiency, good efficiency considering the context of that game, which was a rock fight. His team scored 90 points. Aaron Gordon, KCP, and MPJ combined for 16 points on 7 of 24 shooting. So if we're playing the blame game, it's like, hey, when your best guy by far doesn't quite live up to his level, you got to hold him accountable for that. But like, come on, man. I mean, very clearly that was a loss that was on the supporting cast. And I think overall, people are just taking Nuggets skepticism a bit too far right now. Like, KCP is a big loss. I get it. I think it's a big loss. I think it's a shame that they didn't keep him. But I would not underestimate the overwhelming dominance of Nikola Jokic. And that's another thing, because Sixers fans might talk about situation. They might talk about the very nice supporting cast that was assembled around Nikola Jokic. Couple things there. First of all, it is a group that is desperately lacking in shot creation, if not for his overwhelming impact and his ability to consistently create great shots for those guys, right? Aaron Gordon, if you take Jokic out of the picture, well, what do you have? You have a below-average shooter. You have a guy who's a solid ball handler, a good athlete, but he can't be entrusted with serious responsibilities. It's the fact that you have a dude who can feed him multiple times a game in the dunker spot, create a great shot quality for him. MPJ is a lethal catch and shooter, right? Can do nothing with the ball in his hands off the bounce. Nikola Jokic is the sort of dude who creates opportunities for him at such high volume. And when he had none of those dudes out there, right? I mean, when he was dealing with the dregs of this league, when Jamal was hurt, when MPJ was hurt, when KCP was just a twinkle in the Nuggets' eye, he's still giving you 30, 12, 6. This is in back-to-back postseasons in 2021 and 2022 on, I believe, like 62, 63% true shooting, right? I mean, those are better postseasons than, I would argue, anything that we've seen from Joel Embiid, and those are in the worst circumstances we've seen any superstar in postseasons in recent years. And by the way, the Nuggets are posting top 5 playoff offenses both of those years. I sense that I'm going into a monologue even when I said I wouldn't want to do it, but like, come on, man. Respect one of the offensive GOATs, if not the offensive GOAT. What is more valuable than proving time and again that you can completely, reliably, inevitably dominate a game like that? Like, that baseline value is just so absurdly high. It's up there for the highest floor that we've seen in NBA history. It is so consistent. The shot quality never wavers. The rebounding is always dominant. He's the number 1 center in basketball and the number 1 player in basketball.
God, I love you, man. Carson, I'm not going to do my Jokic spiel, bro.
God, I tried.
I knew it was coming. It's inevitable every time.
One point led to another, you know? I had shit to say.
Yeah, dude. Knee bones connected
Did
to
I
the
mention
leg
the
bone,
efficiency?
man.
Did I mention the efficiency?
Dude, you didn't mention Facundo Campazzo or Austin Rivers, unfortunately.
And I didn't mention Monte Morris or Will Barton. But just know, those were his, backcourt starters.
True story. I completely agree, man. I think he's unequivocally the best center in the league, and I think he's the best player in the world. I would hear an argument for Giannis or Luka for the best player in the world title, but I think he's got to be the best center in the league.
Yeah, well, you know how I feel about the arguments for Giannis and Luka. I don't think that they hold all that much validity. I think that Giannis has a better case than Luka. I just think that Jokic's efficiency, the multifaceted impact offensively, how conducive it is to great team offense, scaling just in a number of different ways. The fact that you cannot possibly replicate his impact when he's off the floor, right? There are shot creators who can bring you a semblance of what Luka does when you have a Kyrie Irving on the floor and Luka off it. There's nobody on the planet who comes close to bringing the offensive value in the way that Nikola Jokic does. Makes him completely irreplaceable and one of the most impactful players in the history of this game. All right, that's it. I think that I got everything off my chest that I need to say about Jokic. It's the offseason, man. It's the offseason. We haven't had a chance to talk about the boy for a couple months, at least not like this. So, again, when your floor is like still being the best player in the postseason, Nikola Jokic was still the best player in this postseason, Logan. When that's your floor, like, in a lot of ways, even at a relative low point for him, he just cemented his crown because he is that dominant. All right, that's enough glazing. If you guys want more Jokic glazing, check out this channel. But also check it out for great basketball content. Check it out for great football content. Check it out for trivia. We are bringing on guests at a volume that you've never seen, and we're having a great time with them. That is all on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't, and if you want to continue to see our content. You can listen to the show across audio platforms. You can check us out across social, TikTok, Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see our trivia clips. You can see some original content that we create for the platform, some clips from the show, all of that across our social. If you want to buy that hat right off Logan Camden's head, that very specific sweaty hat that has been in intimate contact with his bald head, you can do so at thevolume.com for $40,000 US. And you can also buy it for 1.2 million Thai baht, because I know you guys were thinking, hold on, wait a second. I don't know the conversion. It's about 30 to 1. So 1.2 million Thai baht for that hat right off of Logan's head. And you can join our Discord if you want to just chat with the fellas. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Breber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.